Well, hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topic for tonight is geopolitical shifts. And I will get right to the discussion of geopolitical shifts. And I'll start with an article from Counterpunch, published on January 4th, 2024. It's an article, by Ramzi Baroud, well-known writer on the Middle East. And the title of it is Gaza, Saudi, Iran, Venezuela, and more. This is an image by Omer Yildiz. And I don't know what it's an image of. They didn't identify it. It looks like a whole bunch of people protesting, but we don't know what we're seeing. Going on with the article, it would have been outlandish to suggest I seem to have lost that, so hang on a second and let me get it back. What did I do with it? I must have closed it because it's gone. But let me find it again. Yeah. There it is. So I'm going to have to put it in the box again because I lost the article for some reason before. Okay, so here it is again by Ramzi Baroud. It would have been outlandish to suggest that a small region such as Gaza, seemingly bereft of significant natural resources, political will of its own, and let alone sovereignty, would have become the world's most significant geopolitical spot on Earth. The ongoing Israeli war on Gaza and the legendary resistance of the Palestinian people, however, have changed our calculation, or perhaps a miscalculation, regarding what a besieged nation can achieve in terms of collective resistance. In fact, changing the rules of the game altogether. However, it is still too early to fathom the surely significant possible outcomes of the current upheaval resulting from the Gaza war and resistance. While Israel and the United States are desperate to return to the status quo model, which existed in the Middle East prior to October 7th, the newly emerging Palestinian leadership is keen on introducing a new era of international relations, namely new geopolitical players who could in turn rope in new allies with their own political ambition and economic interests. That said, 2023 was also rife with other major geopolitical shifts that will impact our world in the coming year. In fact, for many years to come. I guess I would have added, yet another many there, many, many years to come. These are some of the most significant geopolitical events with the potential of having a long lasting impact on international relations. The Saudi Iran deal. One is the Saudi Iran deal. The Riyadh Tehran political reconciliation on April 6th, a significant day, my brother's birthday, took the region and the world by surprise, as the two Muslim neighbors have had major differences that resulted in a breakdown of relations 7 years ago. The rift between the two significant Middle Eastern, also Muslim and oil producing countries has impacted the geopolitical stability of the Middle East, invited greater foreign meddling, and has directly or indirectly contributed to existing conflicts. The identity of the mediator of the peace treaty, China, was equally significant, as this opportunity allowed for the first time in the modern history of the region Beijing to play the role of the peacemaker in an area long dominated by U.S. Western influence. The Saudi Iran deal has proved durable despite the ongoing conflicts and struggles that continue to define the region. Expansion of BRICS. Two is the expansion of BRICS. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have taken their economic alliance to new heights in 2023. The group has agreed on August 24th to allow for a significant expansion to its membership and will, as of January 1st, 2024, include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, UAE. Also, the BRICS New Development Bank is itself expanding, both in terms of its membership and its overall financial capital. According to data from the UK-based research firm Acorn Macro Consulting, BRICS members have surpassed the group of seven, the G7, in terms of gross domestic product, GDP, calculated on purchasing power parity. Why is this significant? The importance of BRICS has become more apparent following the Russia-Ukraine war in February 2022, as it allowed Russia significant margins to operate economically beyond the confines of Western-led sanctions. With China, too, facing a U.S.-led trade war, BRICS has created new platforms for new major markets, concentrated mostly in the global South. With the growing polarization between the West and the East, and the global North and the global South, it was only natural that BRICS began to take on a greater political role with a more defined political discourse. This shall become even more apparent in the coming year. The geopolitical importance of BRICS lies mostly in its ability to create a powerful new model for alternative economic, financial, and eventually political platforms that will directly challenge Western hegemony around the world. Rise and fall. 3 is the rise and fall of international political actors. Shortly before the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, Germany has served as the economic engine of Europe. Despite the setbacks and challenges that faced various Western European economies, Europe seemed on its way to a complete recovery from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. True, some analysts warned of over-optimism and structural fault lines, but Europe persisted in its recovery efforts. Then the Ukraine war started, exposing Europe's vulnerable economic spots, mainly its energy dependency, along with its geopolitical geopolitical limitations, namely the balancing act between its political and military reliance on the United States and its energy reliance on Russia and its economic reliance on China. Europe's dream of recovery has turned into a seemingly never-ending nightmare, according to a study conducted by the Swiss National Bank and published last September. Quote, the war in Ukraine has reduced the European economic growth and, quote, considerably pushed up inflation across the continent, Reuters reported. While Europe continues to struggle over this unenviable position, other countries that for many years have for many years been actually marginalized due to their outright political conflicts with Western countries, are finding themselves in a much stronger position. The changing global military dynamics have indeed allowed countries such as Mali, Niger, Chad, also Burkina Faso and others, mostly in West Africa and its Sahel region, to confront their former colonizers, in this case France, and to redefine the concept of post-colonial sovereignty. Venezuela, on the other hand, which was heavily sanctioned by Washington, is finally able to sell its oil on the international market, thus pivoting away from a grinding economic crisis unprecedented in decades. This only became possible because of the global energy crisis resulting from the war in Ukraine. All of these geopolitical shifts are likely to stay with us in 2024, leading to yet other significant changes to the world's political map, and unfortunately, yet more conflicts as well. Time will tell. Time will tell. But I have to add a further development to this particular list, and that was a flight that was taken just in the last couple of days to China. A flight by Francisco Maduro, Venezuela, to go to visit Xi Jinping in China, no doubt, to make some oil deals with Xi Jinping for Venezuelan oil. Unless I miss my guess, what will probably happen is that China will probably help the Venezuelans to build the oil refining plants they need to refine their very heavy oil quickly, so Venezuela would no longer be dependent on the coke facilities for refinement of oil. I kind of guess that's the kind of agreement that's going to come out of this, plus a long-term contract for selling refined Venezuelan oil to China at a very good price. That it would be another very significant shift in the geopolitical world, and would represent a real big inroad for China, in Latin America. It would certainly make the geopolitical planners inside of the United States grind their teeth. So let's see if that happens. I'm kind of betting on that kind of deal coming out of the trip. So we're going to have to see whether the Venezuelans and the Chinese celebrate a deal together coming soon. Okay, shifting over to the next of my pieces. Wait a minute. If you'll indulge me for a moment. I'm going to share this piece on Facebook. So, hi Steve, hi Kay. Hey Steve Day, comment to International Justice Court in South Africa on Facebook. Let me see if I can bring this up here. So that's a link. I'm sure it's a very interesting link. Steve says hello, and Kay Ryan says hi, Joe and D, and Steve says hi, Kay. So at this point, I'm going to go back to, my second piece for tonight. Which is on Israel's Gaza withdrawal, a prelude to full-out war. This one is from The Cradle. The author is Hassan Ilake. Iran's Gaza withdrawal, a prelude to full-out war. Don't be lulled by the Israeli troop withdrawal from northern Gaza. Tel Aviv has no intention of ending this war and is escalating on all its other fronts, including with Lebanon. As Netanyahu, at the start of the new year, Israel's occupation army began implementing the withdrawal of a large portion of its forces from the northern Gaza Strip. This withdrawal did not mean the end of the war in Gaza, and it certainly did not suggest calm on the Lebanese-Israeli front. On the contrary, reducing the pace of the war on the Gaza Strip increases the possibilities of an Israel war fought with Lebanon. The battles taking place between the occupation army and Hezbollah along the southern border of Lebanon since 8th October in support of the resistance in Gaza have been increasing in intensity day after day. Washington and Tel Aviv have sought to maximize pressure on Hezbollah by warning of the possibility of a large-scale war between Israeli forces and the Lebanese resistance. These tactics were in effect long before the assassination of Hamas deputy head of the political bureau, Saleh El-Aruri, on the 2nd of January by an Israeli airstrike in Dahiyah, the southern suburb of Beirut. The killing of Al-Aruri now increases the chance of the war expanding. The third stage is coming. The first stage of Tel Aviv's war was the mass destruction and occupation of northern Gaza. The second stage is the occupation of key points in the south of the Gaza Strip, where Palestinian civilians have flocked for safety. The current troop withdrawal from the territories north means the Israelis are cementing their southern plans and preparing to move on to phase 3, the long, low-intensity war. As it enters the third stage, the occupation army intends to maintain a geographical buffer surrounding the northern Gaza Strip. It also plans to continue occupying the Gaza Valley, central Gaza, while completing its operations in Khan Yunis in the south. The fate of the Philadelphia Axis, or Salah ad-Din Axis, a strip of land on the border between Gaza and Egypt, which Israel wants to control, will be left to deliberations between Tel Aviv and Cairo. This is to ensure that incidents do not occur that lead to tension between the two parties, as well as two guarantors. This is to ensure that incidents do not occur that lead to tension between the two parties, as well as to guarantee that refugees do not flow from the south of the Gaza Strip towards Sinai. Israel's ground withdrawal from northern Gaza is taking place primarily because the occupation army's target bank has been depleted. All targets prior to the start of the war have been destroyed, and all new operational targets have been bombed. Despite this, the Palestinian resistance continues to carry out operations against Israeli forces. These organizations remain relatively unscathed in the entire area of the Gaza Strip, in the northern Gaza Strip, which will increase the ability of the resistance to inflict losses on occupation ranks now and in the future. This clear Israeli loss in terms of Tel Aviv's stated war objectives has been made evident by two basic factors. First, that the occupation army cannot cleanse the northern Gaza Strip house by house or tunnel by tunnel, because this process will take years, expose more of its soldiers to danger, cannot be implemented without further displacing the entire population of northern Gaza or massacring them. It should be noted, despite Israeli attempts to portray matters otherwise, that hundreds of thousands of civilians still present in the north. Second, the Israeli government needs to gradually re-inject reserve soldiers into the country's economy to jumpstart it, to ensure that the productive sectors not exposed to damage from which recovery will take a long time. This despite the fact that the U.S. and much of Europe appear ready to assist Israel's economy if necessary. These measures are being taken because Israel has patently failed to achieve the two main goals of its war, namely eliminating the Hamas-led resistance in Gaza and liberating the Israeli prisoners captured by the resistance on the 7th of October. There remains a basic motive that must be noted. There remains a basic motive that must be noted. The Israeli army is currently putting all its efforts into implementing a U.S. decision to push the war from its first and second phases into the third phase before the end of January 2024. This requires the war to be managed at a slower boil, drawing less attention to Israeli carnage and the mass suffering of Palestinians. After 3 months of brutalities, Washington has assessed the Israeli army as unable to eliminate the resistance or the possibilities of regional escalation, and has noted significant harm caused to the U.S. administration of Joe Biden as he enters the presidential primary season. An escalation with Lebanon, as the Israeli occupation army moves to focus its operations on the southern Gaza Strip. The intensity of military operations along the Lebanese border between Hezbollah and the Israeli army has also been ratcheted up. Hezbollah increased its targeting of occupation soldiers, both in their visible locations and inside the settlements of northern Palestine. The information capabilities of Hezbollah have developed in both sophistication and accuracy during the past months. The Lebanese resistance fighters have employed missile types not previously utilized, which have a greater range and better destructive capacity than previous generations. On the other hand, Tel Aviv has doubled the firepower it used in southern Lebanon. The Israelis continue to limit their operations to the area south of the Litani River and are not expanding their scope except to target resistance groups that carry out strikes across the border. In recent weeks, the occupation army's destructive power has risen dramatically since the early days of the battle. By increasing its strikes, Israel's leadership seeks to inflict the greatest possible number of losses among the ranks of the resistance fighters, as well as to spread panic among the residents of southern Lebanon, displacing more of them and destroying the largest possible number of homes. This places a burden on both Hezbollah and the Lebanese state in the reconstruction process after the end of hostilities. But there is a longer-term goal in this Israeli military performance. The government in Tel Aviv, according to its official statements, wants Hezbollah to withdraw from the south of the Litani to ensure the security of Israeli settlers in northern Palestine who abandon their homes, either voluntarily or under evacuation orders from their army. By some estimates, the number of Israelis fleeing their settlements in occupied North Palestine has reached more than 230,000 people. In parallel with the public statements, there were messages which began arriving in Beirut from the U.S. and from European capitals demanding what they call, quote, the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, meaning Hezbollah's withdrawal from the south of the Litani River. According to emerging information, Tel Aviv is betting that Hezbollah will be deterred as the 2019 economic collapse from which Lebanon has not yet recovered, and the country's long-running internal tensions are factors that will ultimately prevent Hezbollah from waging war. Israel is therefore hoping that Hezbollah will yield to pressure and meet its demands regarding the withdrawal of its fighters from the border area with occupied Palestine. The Israeli assessment of Lebanese affairs preceded assassination of al-Aruri in Beirut on the 2nd of January, but in the same way that Israel military commanders and politicians have underestimated and dismissed armed Palestinian resistance initiatives within occupied lands prior to 7th of October, They continue to cling to a dated Israeli calculus that Hezbollah will never fully retaliate, or that it will only do so in a way that stops short of war. Granted, Hezbollah does genuinely seek to limit the scope of the military confrontation and has often pushed for a Gaza ceasefire to end hostilities throughout the region. Hezbollah is equally concerned about not disrupting the lives and livelihood of southern residents. But while Hezbollah takes into account the complex political and economic reality in Lebanon, it is not prepared to make concessions. Sources in the resistance axis say that Israel, as Hezbollah sees it, is not in a position to go to war with Lebanon when it cannot even compensate or digest the massive strategic losses it has incurred from Operation Al Aqsa Flood. Despite its desire to not expand the war, Hezbollah has already begun to prepare for it. Hezbollah's party statement issued after the assassination of al-Aruri indicates this, and field measures and developments will begin to appear in time. What Israel was unable to achieve in Gaza, restoring deterrence while facing the tight ranks of the region's axis of resistance, it will most certainly not be allowed to gain in Lebanon. The first signs of this will appear in plans that Hezbollah is expected to carry out in response to Israel's 2nd of January raid on Dahiya to assassinate al-Aruri, the first of its kind since August 2006, and to which its Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah had previously threatened he would respond. The bottom line is that Tel Aviv's assessment of war with Lebanon is based on its reading that Hezbollah wishes to prevent a major confrontation at any cost. Not only is this calculus wrong, but it has also muddled Israeli minds to the point where this may itself lead to the outbreak of a destructive war between the two sides. I couldn't agree with this article more. I think that Israel is not effectively assessing the changes in Hezbollah capability since the earlier exchanges of violence with them. I think their capability today is far greater than it used to be. I don't think that if there is open war between Hezbollah, and Israel, it will be a hard blow, of course, to the economy, of Lebanon, but also to the economy, of Israel. And I think for the first time, we will see considerable bombing and damage and destruction, in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, and that a good part of the north of Israel will be devastated. I don't think that doesn't. I think that what Hezbollah is going to do, that they'll be carefully controlled by Nasrallah, and he will manage the escalation very carefully. But there will be a significant attack, on Israel in retaliation for the assassination, and that will be significant enough that it will threaten very significant damage to Israel if they should escalate in return. So then the ball will be, in the Israeli court, and we will see if they continue to escalate. I think with the retaliation that Hezbollah will be seeking to communicate to Israel, that in a full encounter with Hezbollah, the Israelis cannot win without severe destruction of the north of Israel. And I think Hezbollah will be demonstrating to the Israelis that their capabilities in the rockets, and missile area are so great that it will show the Israelis that the Iron Dome, perhaps even supplemented by the Iron Beam that Israel has used only sparingly, is likely to be overwhelmed by the missiles and drones and rockets that Hezbollah will be able to bring to bear. But I think there will be a testing of this. In other words, Nasrallah will have to demonstrate in his retaliation extreme capability to get by the Israeli defenses in order to persuade the Israelis that they cannot win a war with them. So we'll be seeing, I think, a further escalation soon, and then the ball will again be in the Israeli court to see if they want to respond or not. What could happen is very significant for the United States, of course, because the United States does not want a wider war, in this area. How Israel responds to the coming attack from Hezbollah may well be determined by whether the administration here decides to stand on its two legs and to deliver some very pointed messages to Israel saying that they no longer have a blank check. And I believe that it will also be necessary for the United States to Israel that if they pursue this further, following the retaliation coming from Hezbollah, that they may well find themselves with an extreme showdown, an extreme slowdown of U.S. support for them, in this conflict. I think the U.S. has to pull the Israelis back, from the brink. That we have to show them that we will not be pulled into a wider war. They cannot count on us for that. And I think we also have to pressure them to get a ceasefire, in Gaza, so that there's a considerable reduction in violence there, because the Israelis may have pulled the troops out of Gaza, but the intensity of the air attacks is still very great, and many innocents are still being killed, and that has to stop. So let me stop the screen then for this. Got Wagner's show back. Lost MMC. Oh yeah, Wagner. Says we're going to be sucked into war. We could well be sucked into war unless the administration decides to be strong. Yeah, you're talking about Alex Wagner's show, right? Haven't watched Alex in a very long time. Shifting now to another area, of conflict, specifically to an article from Common Dreams. This is in the Rights and Justice section of Common Dreams. Oh, wait a minute. I have the wrong article there. I don't know how I pulled that up. Let me double check that out. Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pulled up a Common Dreams article here. I should have pulled up this article. I really could use a producer for my shows. Maybe one day I'll be able to get to that point. This is from Truth Out. The headline is Israel is terrified. The World Court will decide it's committing a genocide. South Africa, party to the Genocide Convention, charged Israel with genocide in the International Court of Justice, otherwise known as the World Court, of course. This is from Marjorie Cohn, a great writer on legal matters, from Truth Out, January 6, 2024. And here's the picture of the International Court of Justice, otherwise known as the World Court, at The Hague, in the Netherlands. That picture is from July 23rd, 2018. And the picture is from the Abdullah Siran Andalou Agency and Getty Images. And this is part of the series Human Rights and Global Wrongs. For nearly 3 months, Israel has enjoyed virtual impunity for its atrocious crimes against the Palestinian people. That changed on December 29th when South Africa, a state party to the Genocide Convention, filed an 84-page application in the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, a world court, alleging that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. South Africa's well-documented application alleges that, quote, acts and omissions by Israel are genocidal in character, as they are committed with the requisite specific intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as part of the broader Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group, unquote, and that, quote, the conduct of Israel through its state organs, state agents, and other persons and entities acting on its instructions or under its direction, control, or influence in relation to Palestinians in Gaza is in violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. Israel is mounting a full court press to prevent an ICJ finding that it's committing genocide in Gaza. On January 4th, the Israeli Foreign Ministry instructed its embassies to pressure politicians and diplomats in their host countries to make statements opposing South Africa's case at the ICJ. In its application, South Africa cited 8 allegations to support its contention that Israel is perpetrating genocide in Gaza, They include 1. Killing Palestinians in Gaza, including a proportion of women and children, approximately 70% of the more than 21,110 fatalities. Some appear to have been subjected to summary execution. That is true. 2. Causing serious mental and bodily harm to Palestinians in Gaza, including maiming, psychological trauma, and inhuman and degrading treatment. That too is true, based on very heavy evidence we've received in the last week, causing the forced evacuation, the last 2 weeks anyway. 3. Causing the forced evacuation, displacement of about 85% of Palestinians in Gaza, including children, the elderly and infirm, and the sick and wounded. Israel is also causing the massive destruction of Palestinian homes, villages, towns, by refugee camps and entire areas, which precludes the return of a significant proportion of the Palestinian people to their homes. 4. Causing widespread hunger, starvation, and dehydration to the besieged Palestinians in Gaza by impeding sufficient humanitarian assistance, cutting off sufficient food, water, fuel, and electricity, and destroying bakeries, mills, agricultural lands, and other means of production and sustenance. 5. Failing to provide and restricting the provision of adequate clothing, shelter, hygiene, and sanitation to Palestinians in Gaza, including 1.9 million internally displaced persons. This has compelled them to live in dangerous situations of squalor, in conjunction with routine targeting and destruction of places of shelter and killing and wounding of persons who were sheltering, including women, children, the elderly, and the disabled. Failing to provide for or ensure the provision of medical care to Palestinians in Gaza, including those medical needs created by other genocidal acts that are causing serious bodily harm. This is occurring by direct attacks on Palestinian hospitals, ambulances, and other healthcare facilities, the killing of Palestinian doctors, medics, and nurses, including the most qualified medics in Gaza, and the destruction and disabling of Gaza's medical system. 7. Destroying Palestinian life in Gaza by destroying its infrastructure, schools, universities, courts, public buildings, public records, libraries, stores, churches, mosques, roads, utilities, and other facilities necessary to sustain the lives of Palestinians as a group. Israel is killing whole families, erasing entire oral histories, and killing prominent and distinguished members of society. 8. Imposing measures intended to prevent Palestinian births in Israel, including through reproductive violence inflicted on Palestinian women, newborns, infants, and children. South Africa cited myriad statements by Israeli officials that constitute direct evidence of an intent to commit genocide. Quote, Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything, unquote. Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said, quote again, it doesn't take one day. If it doesn't take one day, it will take a week. It will take weeks or even months. We will reach all places, unquote. Avi Dichter, Israel's Minister of Agriculture, declared, we are now actually rolling out the Gaza Nakba, a reference to the 1948 ethnic cleansing of Palestinians to create the state of Israel. Quote, now we all have one common goal, erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth, unquote, said Nissim Vaturi, the deputy speaker of the Knesset and member of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee, proclaimed. Israel's strategy to defeat South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice. Israel and its chief patron, the United States, understand the magnitude of South Africa's ICJ application, and they are livid. Israel usually thumbs its nose at international institutions, but it is taking South Africa's case seriously. 2021, when the International Criminal Court launched an investigation into Israel's alleged war crimes in Gaza, Israel firmly rejected the legitimacy of the probe. Quote, Israel generally doesn't participate in such proceedings, unquote. Professor Eliav Lieblich, an international expert at Tel Aviv University, said to Haaretz, but, quote again, but this isn't a UN inquiry commission or the International Criminal Court in The Hague, whose authority Israel rejects. It's the International Court of Justice, which derives its power from a treaty Israel joined. So it can't reject it on the usual grounds of lack of authority. It is also a body with international prestige, unquote. The January 4th cable from the Israeli Foreign Ministry says that Israel's, quote, strategic goal is that the ICJ reject South Africa's request for an injunction to suspend Israel's military action in Gaza, refuse to find that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and rule that Israel is complying with international law. Quote, a ruling by the court could have significant potential implications that are not only in the legal world, but have practical, bilateral, also multilateral economic security implications and ramifications, quote, the cable states, and quote again, we asked for an immediate and unequivocal public statement along the following lines to publicly and clearly state that your country rejects the outrageous, absurd, and baseless allegations made against Israel, unquote. Cable instructs Israeli embassies to urge diplomats and politicians at the highest level, quote, to publicly acknowledge that Israel is working together with international actors to increase the humanitarian aid to Gaza, as well as to minimize damage to civilians while acting in self-defense after the horrible October 7th attack by a genocidal terrorist organization, unquote. Quote again, well, this is an answer for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, spokesperson by the name of Elon Balevi, and he said, quote, the state of Israel will appear before the ICJ at The Hague to dispel South Africa's absurd blood libel, unquote. South Africa's application is, quote again, without legal merit and constitutes a basic exploitation and contempt of court, unquote, he said. Israel is pulling out all the stops, including disingenuous accusations of, quote, blood libel, unquote, an anti-Semitic trope that erroneously accuses Jews of the ritual sacrifice of Christian children. Quote, how tragic that the rainbow nation that prides itself on fighting racism will be fighting pro bono for anti-Jewish racists, Levy added ironically. He made the astonishing claim that Israel's military campaign to destroy Hamas in Gaza is designed to prevent the genocide of the Jews. As the old adage goes, when you're being run out of town, get in front of the crowd and act like you're leading the parade. The Biden regime rose to defend its staunch ally Israel. U.S. National Security spokesman John Kirby lambasted South Africa's ICJ application as, quote, meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever, Kirby claimed, and quote again, Israel is not trying to wipe the Palestinian people off the map. Israel is not trying to wipe Gaza off the map. Israel is trying to defend itself against a genocidal terrorist threat, unquote, echoing Israel's preposterous assertion. All I have to say about that is tell that to the Israeli real estate agents who were trying to sell property, who were trying to sell property to settlers to get them to move to the northern part of Gaza right now. Tell that to the real estate agents. We know what the Israelis are doing is trying to get rid of the Palestinians and make Gaza an Israeli territory, make it a part of Israel. Kirby's contention that Israel is trying to prevent genocide is particularly absurd, given the fact that since Hamas killed 1,200 Israelis on October 7th, that, by the way, is incorrect. Hamas did not kill 1,200 Israelis on October 7th. It looks like roughly 600 or more of those Israelis were killed by the Israeli army itself in its attempted brutal retaliation, brutal but incompetent retaliation against Hamas forces, which in the process of retaliation themselves killed a majority of the Israelis who died on that day. Israeli forces have killed at least 22,100 Gazans, about 9,100 of whom are children. At least 57,000 persons have been wounded, and at least 7,000 are reported missing. Untold numbers of people have trapped beneath the rubble. Okay, so provisional measures against Israel can have immediate impact. South Africa is requesting that the ICJ order provisional measures, interim injunction, in order to, quote, protect against further severe and irreparable harm to the rights of the Palestinian people under the Genocide Convention, unquote. South Africa is also asking the court, quote, to ensure Israel's compliance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, not to engage in genocide and to prevent and to punish genocide, unquote. The provisional measures South Africa seeks include ordering Israel to, quote, immediately suspend its military operations in and against Gaza, unquote, and to cease and desist from killing and causing seriously bodily or mental harm to Palestinians, inflicting on them conditions of life intended to destroy them in whole or in part, and imposing measures to prevent Palestinian births. South Africa wants the ICJ to order that Israel stop expelling and forcibly displacing Palestinians and depriving them of food, water, fuel, and medical supplies and assistance. The judicial arm of the United Nations, the ICJ, is composed of 15 judges who are elected for a 9-year term by the UN General Assembly and the Security Council. It is not a criminal tribunal like the International Criminal Court. Rather, it resolves disputes between countries. If a party to the Genocide Convention believes that another party has failed to comply with its obligations, it can take that country to the ICJ to determine its responsibility. This was the case of Bosnia versus Serbia, in which the court found that Serbia violated its duties to prevent and punish that genocide under the convention. The obligations in the Genocide Convention are erga omnes partes, that is, obligations owed by a state towards all the states parties to the conventions. The ICJ has stated, quote, in such a convention, the contracting states do not have any interests of their own. They merely have, one and all, a common interest, namely the accomplishment of those high purposes which are the raison d'etre of the convention, unquote. Article 94 of the UN Charter says that all parties to a dispute must comply with the decisions of the ICJ, and if a party fails to do so, the other party may go to the UN Security Council for the enforcement of the decision. An average ICJ case from start to finish can take several years. It was nearly 15 years from the time that Bosnia first filed its case against Serbia in 1993 to the issuance of the final judgment on the merits in 2007. However, a case can have an immediate impact. The filing of a case in the ICJ sends a strong message to Israel that the international community will not tolerate its actions and will seek to hold it accountable. Also, provisional measures can be issued quickly. For the ICJ, ordered measures 19 days after the Bosnian case was initiated. Also, provisional measures are binding on the party against whom they are ordered, and compliance with them can be monitored by both the ICJ and the Security Council. Judgments on the merits rendered by the ICJ in disputes between parties are binding on the parties involved. Article 94 of the UN Charter provides that, quote, each member of the United Nations undertakes to comply with the decision of the court in any case to which it is a party, unquote. The judgments of the court are final. There is no appeal. Public hearings on South Africa's request for provisional members before provisional measures will take place on January 11th and 12th at the ICJ, which is located in the Peace Palace in The Hague, in the Netherlands. The hearings will be live streamed from 4 to 6 a.m. Eastern and 1 to 3 a.m. Pacific on the court's website and on UN Web TV. The court could order provisional measures within a week after the hearings. Other states parties to the Genocide Convention can join South Africa's case. Other state parties to the Genocide Convention can either request permission to intervene in the case filed by South Africa or file their own applications against Israel in the ICJ. South Africa's application identifies several countries that have referred to Israel's genocide in Gaza. They include Algeria, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, Palestine, also Turkey, Venezuela, Bangladesh, Egypt, Honduras, Iraq, Jordan, also Libya, Malaysia, Namibia, Pakistan, and Syria. On January 5th, the Quds News Network tweeted, quote, Jordan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ayman Safadi, announces that his country backs South Africa's genocide case against Israel in the ICJ. He added that the Jordanian government is working on a legal file to follow up the case. Turkey, Malaysia, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation had announced they backed the case too. The newly formed International Coalition to Stop Genocide in Palestine, endorsed by more than 600 groups throughout the world, has convened to urge state parties to invoke the Genocide Convention. The coalition contends, quote, declarations of intervention in support of South Africa's invocation of the Genocide Convention against Israel will increase the likelihood that a positive finding of the crime of genocide will be enforced by the United Nations, such that actions will be taken to end all acts of genocide, and those who are responsible for the acts will be held accountable. During the first week of January, delegations of, quote, grassroots diplomats, spearheaded by Code Pink, World Beyond War, and Roots Action, mounted a campaign across the United States urging nations to submit declarations of intervention in South Africa's case against Israel in the ICJ. Activists traveled to 12 cities, visiting UN missions, embassies and consulates from Colombia, Pakistan, also Bolivia, Bangladesh, the African Union, Ghana, Chile, Ethiopia, Turkey, Belize, also Brazil, Denmark, France, Honduras, Ireland, Spain, Greece, also Mexico, Italy, Haiti, Belgium, Kuwait, and Malaysia, and Slovakia. Quote, this is the rare case where collective social pressure urging governments to support the South African case can be a sharp turning point for Palestine, unquote, said Balama Sadiq, a Palestinian attorney based in New York, whose firm convened the Palestinian Assembly for Liberation's Commission on War Crimes Justice, also reparations and return. Quote, we need more states to file supporting interventions, and we need the court to feel the watchful eye of the masses so as to withstand what will be extreme U.S. political pressure on the court, unquote. Suzanne Adeley, president of the National Lawyers Guild, also noted, quote, the increasing global isolation of Israel and the United States and the European allies is an indicator. This is a key moment for popular movements to move their governments in the direction of taking these steps and being on the right side of history. Indeed, since October 7th, millions of people throughout the world have marched, protested, and demonstrated in support of Palestinian Palestinian liberation. Roots Action and World Beyond War have created a template that organizations and individuals can use to urge other state parties to the genocide to file a declaration of intervention in South Africa's genocide case against Israel, in the ICJ. And that is that article by Marjorie Cohn. It is, I believe, very factual. It reports on the complaint, in the ICJ. It reports on the facts that are supporting, the complaint. It reports on the organized groups that are getting behind the complaint. 2 days from now, the court will convene and begin to consider the case. And the initial hearings will be on June 11th, on January 11th, and on January 12th. And there could be preliminary injunctions coming from that. Of course, not on January 11th and January 12th, but perhaps, a week later. I'm not quite finished yet. No, I think Dee had some articles to finish up on her show, with Madeline. And so I think she probably decided it was getting too late and she wasn't going to join me. But I'm going to share the screen now. I wanted to call attention to another very important article. This is by Peter Boffinger. It appeared in Social Europe. It's called Germany, the Sick Man of Europe, but, quote, dumb, unquote, as well. This is by Peter Boffinger. That sounds like a German name, but he might be Swiss also, of course. Wrote this on the 8th of January, 2024. The austerity package stemming from an adverse constitutional court ruling, Peter Boffinger writes, defies logic. And here's a picture of a banner for the polycrisis. Austerity makes it impossible to assuage the social and ecological concerns of protesters such as these in Hamburg in late 2022. Last month, the Financial Times quoted a chip maker saying Germany is not just the sick man of Europe, it turns out it is also the dumb man of Europe, unquote. It sounds exaggerated but the austerity package announced by its government a week later represents anything but a smart policy. The package was made necessary by a ruling in mid-November by the Federal Constitutional Court. The court had ruled that the planned financing of the so-called Climate and Transformation Fund with unused credit authorizations from the pandemic year 2021 was incompatible with the Constitution. The only way out would have been to invoke the emergency clause of the Schulden-Bremse debt brake for 2024, as in the years 2020 to 2023. Enshrined in the Constitution, this limits the federal budget deficit to 0.3.5% of gross domestic product. Isn't that stupid? In emergency situations, however, it can be suspended by a majority vote in the Bundestag. But the Free Democratic Party, the junior partner in the ample coalition, traffic light coalition, with the Social Democrats and the Greens, was not prepared to countenance this. The resulting measures are counterproductive in every respect. The German economy has been chronically weak since the fourth quarter of 2022. GDP fell by 0.3% last year, nor is the outlook for 2024 good. In December's IFO Business Climate Index, companies registered extreme pessimism about the current climate and expectation. It would thus have been helpful if the government had stimulated the economy with expansionary measures. The austerity package instead provided a negative fiscal impulse of around 30 billion euros. Although not comparable in scale, it is reminiscent of the pro-cyclical policy pursued by Heinrich Brüning as chancellor between 1930 and 1932, which paved the way for National Socialism. The measures adopted are also problematic from an anti-inflation point of view. The price ton of carbon dioxide has been raised. Price per ton of carbon dioxide has been raised from 30 euros to 45 euros, a 50% increase. A planned government subsidy of 5.5 billion euros for transmission grid fees has been canceled, leading to an increase in electricity grid fees for residential customers of around 25%. These measures are accompanied by other increases in indirect taxes in 2024. The rate of value-added tax on gas and restaurant services, which had been reduced to 7%, has been raised again to 19%. All in all, fiscal policy is exerting upward pressure on inflation. In an environment of gradual disinflation, such measures are counterproductive. They're also nuts. They prolong what Isabel Schnabel of the executive board of the European Central Bank called, quote, the last mile, unquote, on the road to price stability. Last year, the International Monetary Fund promoted the concept of unconventional fiscal policy, quote unquote, measures with a dampening effect on inflation. The austerity package is the opposite. Okay, I don't think I'm going to go further with this. I'm lacking time, okay, to do this, but it's a very interesting article, all told. But I think the major point has been made. It's simply stupid economic policy that is being followed, okay, by Germany here. Peter Boffinger is a former member of the German Council, okay, of Economic Experts. He's a professor, okay, at Würzburg University, high prestige guy. and he's frank about it. These are stupid policies. In spite of what the Constitution says, it's necessary for Germany and for Europe also, because Germany has been the economic driver, okay, of Europe. Uh, Things are getting really, really tight over there, and the right-wing parties, okay, are rising, and the dangers of extreme rightists taking control, okay, of European governments, very, very high. And yet, it doesn't seem possible for the Europeans to untrack themselves and take, okay, the necessary steps to end this particular tailspin. Now, in conclusion for tonight, I wanted to draw attention to two very important to two videos that I think are very important, okay, that you may want to look at. I'll put these in the chat. I'm pretty sure I put them in the description. But the first YouTube is an interview of Chris Hedges, okay, with Ilan Pappé, who is the Israeli historian, who is he had to leave Israel because he was too frank and truthful, okay, about what was going on there. And this is a very illuminating interview with him about the historical context of everything, but also the current actions and how they are to be viewed. Ilan Pappé is now a professor in England, okay, at Exeter University. He basically uh, uh, his career in Israel was basically ruined. So he had to leave, and he could not continue his critical role there within Israeli society, okay, which was very important. The other YouTube I want to call attention to is again something from Chris Hedges. Here he's interviewing Jeffrey Sachs. He's interviewing him about the world situation in general, of course, but also the Israeli-Gaza war and his opinions on that. And Jeffrey Sachs is just a wonderful statesman. I have high hopes that if we get a decent result out of the election of 2024, and of course, right now it doesn't look like we are going to get a decent result, but if we do get a decent result, I have high hopes that he will be appointed the Secretary of State, okay, of the United States, its leading foreign policy figure. I think he's one of the very few people, perhaps the only one, who can bring peace to the international stage, okay, in the short run. Anyway, I think this video is very important and I commend it, okay, to all of you. And that's my message for tonight. I already read some of your comments. Kay has gotten Wagner's show back. She lost her net again. Her last comment was no D tonight. So I think that covers the comments for tonight. So thank you, Steve, for coming, and Stephen Day, thank you for coming. Kay, thank you for coming also. And I don't know. There was a fourth person here some time ago. I don't know who that was. It might have been Steve, because Steve signed in both from Facebook and also from YouTube. So there was a double sign in there. So Steve might have been the fourth person as well as the third person. So thank you for coming. As I said, I will be back tomorrow night with a rather lengthy discussion Uh, okay, that will be feature an article, okay, by also a co-authored article, but one of the authors, okay, is Dahlia Lithwick, one of the best authors alive for many years on Supreme Court matters, and she will be discussing uh, the main issues involved in the Supreme Court case on whether the Supreme Court will reverse the Colorado, okay, and the main findings that Donald Trump is barred from uh, uh, the ballot. Uh, it's a very interesting article. I'll be reading it, okay, and commenting on it. And so that will be tomorrow night. Also on Thursday night, I'm going back to that very long article on Truthig article on selective accelerationism and the pursuit of cosmic by utopia. We stopped that last Thursday, somewhere in the middle. I promised I would come back to it. And there are also some other articles, also from the field of artificial intelligence, that we may be able to cover on Thursday, okay, as well. Uh, okay, on the issue of AI and human extinction. Uh, and also issues involving artificial artificial intelligence workers, and there are also some other pieces that are quite interesting. We may have time to cover on Thursday. Thursday, I don't have the Friday show, second of the Dump the Corruption shows on Friday. I don't have plans for that yet. Of course, tomorrow's show is, okay, a Dump the Corruption show, because one way to dump the corruption is to get Trump off the ballot. I know there is this tendency to always compare Trump with Biden, say Trump, okay, is better than Biden. That, of course, carries no weight from a dump the corruption point of view. From the DTC point of view, both of them must go by 2024. Okay. Along with most or all of the House of Representatives and much of the Senate. And we need a president who is not a captive of any of the corporate interests. We have to have that. So on that note, I will say good night. Kay says good night all. Okay. I love you all. And I echo her. Okay. I love you all too. So good night. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night.